breakthrough was started in response to a question that I asked the Lord. I said, Lord, where would you be if you were walking around the Twin Cities like you did in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago? And the Lord's response to me was, I would be under the bridge with the homeless. I would be in the inner city with those that are dwelling in poverty. And I said, that's good enough for me. So we formed, a team, and my wife came with on our first mission, and we went down to the rail yards in St. Paul. There were so many people, and they're hidden in these little woodlots along river banks in the inner city. Later on that evening, we had our first encounter with a man under the bridge, and his name is Nick. Nick changed my life and the lives of many other people. Nick gave us access. He gave us access to a community that we wouldn't have had without him. Wherever we went with Nick, we would have favor. People would be willing to open up and share with us, what they were going through, and it was just a neat part of that journey early on. The Lord asked me. He said, "I want to give you a vision of a preferred future." And so he did, and that was a place where, in the future, where I could see it wasn't like this anymore. And so that helped drive that vision that I got from God regarding the plans for the ministry called Breakthrough and the movement that it became and is.
Father, we lift her up, Lord, and she can use that blanket, Lord, and I pray.
So as we continue to go forth, doing that work, one day our volunteers would meet at a place in downtown Minneapolis before we would go out on the trails. One day, this one lady, she was an elderly lady that had been coming quite a bit. She really enjoyed that work. Had asked me when she pulled up if we could give away some hot dogs to the people. And I'm like, sure. And she's got a 5-gallon bucket of hot dogs with a lid on it. I pull it out, I open it up, I look, and there's like all these hot dogs in hot water. She's got some buns, a bottle of ketchup, and a pair of tongs. I had no idea how significant that was going to be, because at that moment she reached in with them tongs and pulled out a hot dog and put it in a bun, and it was like people came out of nowhere. I was like, those hot dogs, about 100 hot dogs, were gone in 5 minutes. The next week we started cooking. We brought a grill and we set it up, a small little grill, and we started cooking down there. And that, over the course of a 3-year period, became like a grand buffet. One day we were praying, and we were wrapping up our evening, and we were praying about the idea of maybe getting a tent, a big like circus tent that we could set up. We prayed about it that night, and the next morning I got a phone call from a guy that wasn't at that meeting, at that prayer meeting the night before. Out of the blue, the next morning he calls, he says, "Hey Dave," his name was Roger, he goes, "Hey Dave, I'm cleaning my garage out this weekend," and he goes, "I got this great big circus tent in my garage. I've been tripping over that thing for ever," and he goes, I got to get rid of it. He goes, you know anybody that could use it?" I'm like, man, we just prayed for one last night. And what started happening on Sundays and Tuesday nights, volunteers were coming out of the woodwork, 60, 80. And as that happened, we started to develop this reputation. The homeless would call our ministry the church without walls. It wasn't necessarily about feeding starving people. It was just about sharing a meal together with people, and it would bring them in. We did it year-round, every Sunday and every Tuesday. We only missed one outreach event in that 3-year period of time. We started to pray for a building. We were a lot of work, packing a trailer up. We were just wearing out, physically. So we asked God for an opportunity to move inside where we wouldn't have to do that. And we got a bus. That was a critical component. We called the bus Old Yeller, a big old yellow school bus. And we got a church within a mile of where we were doing our ministry work. And moved up there, moved in, but we learned some harsh realities about certain communities, and it just didn't seem as though we were really welcome. So it just came to a head. So we said, all right, no, Lord, if not here, then where? And so he sends us over to South Minneapolis, and we were in a building over there on 26th in Bloomington called Oliver. And we were there for about 3 years. And while we were there, we were doing, we continued to do the work that we've always done, but then we started to see a need in the Phillips community, and we started reaching into the various communities. One of them was the Somalian community, Latino community, and the Native American community in the Phillips area. And we started doing mission work into those communities. And as we started to do that, we started to receive missionaries from outstate Minnesota and from all over the country. During that season, that there wasn't really a great place for missionaries to come and stay. So the Lord gave me, it's like He birthed a vision about this equipping center. Being a homeless ministry helps us understand the plight of people who are homeless. All the moving, all of the transition, all the uncertainty. But we were given a building in downtown Minneapolis.
So this space in here, this is going to be our dining hall. So our intention down here is we're going to clear out these walls, obviously, and build this kitchen down here. So now we're up on the second floor, and the second floor is what we've envisioned being a floor for missionaries.
We were down here this summer of 2017. I had noticed that the building was vacant, and now I'm getting a little bit more interested. Had mentioned that to Jim Rottinger and said, hey, we should really check in and find out, who owns that building. So he and I had a meeting a couple of days after that with somebody. The guy asked us a question, where are you guys operating? I told him, we've been renting facilities over the last number of years, and I said, it'd be great if we could find our own. He goes, hey, here's a card. Give this guy a call. He's a real estate agent specializing in properties in downtown Minneapolis. I said, all right. Jim is just a follow-up guy, and so we got back to the office, and he had called that guy. And the first thing the guy said to him was, hey, you guys, I do have a building that might be available. It's on 1000 Currie Avenue in downtown Minneapolis. What was the same building? It was the building we were looking at. And it was the first one he mentioned. So I'm like, wow, must be a God thing, right? Asked him if he could arrange a meeting with the owner, and we'd like to do a walkthrough. So in November of 2017, we met. We're walking right in this room here when Ryan said, maybe we'll just give this building to you. I don't know. So I turned and looked at him. I'm like, well, we'll take it. We don't even have to finish the walkthrough. He's like, well, there's value to the land here. He says, it's at least, $500,000 for just the dirt under the building. And so we toured the building, and while we were walking out and leaving, I just said to Ryan, I said, Ryan, just let us know when you're willing to give us the building. We'll take it. September 17th, actually, I remember it. And I had this overriding sense of urgency to check in and find out about this building that day. Over the next couple of days, we found out that Ryan was going to give the building to the city of Minneapolis. So we came down and met with him. But prior to getting here, I remember asking God, I'm like, what am I going to say? And God spoke to me, not in an audible voice, but the way God speaks to me. And He said, you're going to say exactly what I say, when I say to say. And I started walking around the building again, talking, and I felt that nudge from God, and I'm like, oh man. And so I had to stop and kind of turn around and square Ryan up, and I said this, I said, Ryan, are you a man of God? And he said, well, I'm not a practicing Catholic, but I consider myself a spiritual man. And I just said, Ryan, you're looking at a man of God, and the Lord has a question for you. Do you think you'll get more favor with the city of Minneapolis by giving the building to them? Or do you think you're going to get more favor from God by giving it to us? He stepped back and he's like, you're right. I'm a libertarian. And I'm like, I don't even know what that means, but all right. And he said, No, he goes, I know you guys are going to do good if we, if you guys had this building with, with all the homeless in this area, he goes, I'm going to go to bat for you with the owners. And I'm like, what? And I looked at Jim and I looked back, I go, you're not the owner? He goes, no, I work for the owners. I go, well, that changes a few things. I said, first of all, it's going to get a little weird here, but I said, I have to pray for you. You're going to have to go talk to the owners. And I said, I just want to pray that God would release that anointing on you so that when you talk to them, you'll have the same favor with them that we had with you. He's like, yeah. So I prayed and just asked God to release that anointing to him. And as we were getting ready to walk out of the building, I just said to him, I said, Ryan, I said, tomorrow morning I get on an airplane at 7 o'clock. And I said, I'm excited to hear the news. I get on the airplane the next morning. I had a conference to go to in California. And I turned my phone on at 7 o'clock, probably 6:30 when we boarded, on airplane mode. I flew out to California and, we ended up checking into our hotel room. And I realized my phone had been on airplane mode the whole time. So I turned it on. And it just lit up with all sorts of messages, text messages and emails and stuff. And I'm like, the last thing I saw was a message from Jim Rottinger. He says, Dave, have you checked your email? Please call me as soon as possible. So I just called him. I hadn't checked my email. And he said, Dave, he says, are you sitting down? I said, no, I'm not. Should I be? He goes, I don't know, but we got the building.
We're just looking at creating a space where we can partner with a community who's interested as well in helping the homeless get off the street and get back into society. I started to understand compassion through the eyes of my family, my kids. So when I would see somebody, I would start to see my son or my daughter, and I would ask that question, if they were mine, how would I treat them right now? If my son was out here living in some tent under some bridge, would I let him stay? Of course I wouldn't. I'd go down there, I'd say, come on, son, let's go. So the question is, if you're wondering about whether or not you should consider being a part of the ministry or movement of breakthrough, the question is would you prefer that God send people like me or our team, our ministry team, to meet your son or daughter if they're out there? Would you rather have people like us find them, or the world that's already found them, keep them in the prison that they're in?